Thank you for your time,
No
Gareth.
problem.
The players spoke during the last camp about how some of your messaging had been sort of focused on the chance to make history on German soil. Could you just tell us a bit more about that and how much of a motivation you think that can be for the players this summer?
Well, really, we've never been beyond the semi-final outside of our own country. So that alone, as well as the fact we've never won a European Championship, it gives the players the opportunity, gives all of us the opportunity to make history. And ultimately, that's what we're in the job for. You want to have special nights. We've had a lot of special nights, but we have that desire and need to take that final step.
On paper, it's been suggested it's one of the more maybe straightforward groups. I'm sure you won't look at it like that, particularly when Serbia beat Portugal last month. Obviously, Denmark got to the last semi-final of the Euros. Is the group tougher than it might look at first glance, do you think?
Well, look, every group has the potential to be tough. So you have to perform in a very short period of time at the best of your ability. And excuse me, I think that all of the teams that we play against are capable of winning football matches. We will be rightly favourites to win that group, and we're comfortable with that. But I've been in football a long time, and you can come unstuck if your preparation and your mentality isn't 100% right for any game.
Your fourth tournament as manager, obviously we don't know the final squad yet, but how would you assess the profile of the likely group compared to the previous three tournaments?
Well, I think we've evolved through every tournament, really. There's probably a clearer defined way of playing now over the last couple of years. I mean, we started with a back three, back five, because we didn't have great depth in middle of midfield. We didn't have out-and-out wingers in depth that we could change the team. So over the course of the team, probably going into Qatar and since then, we've been very clearly either a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3, and so I think that's been a more aggressive way of playing, better with our pressure higher up the pitch, and similar patterns with the ball that we've always had. Team have evolved in terms of young players coming in, but that's probably been consistent throughout the time because young players do emerge, and we're happy to give them those opportunities. So that's always couched with a core group of players that have got some big experiences at international level, because you do need, or teams that win historically would suggest you need quite a lot of caps on the pitch for those big moments.
And how do you think you've changed as a manager? What would Gareth Southgate 2024 say to Gareth Southgate 2018?
Well, I've learned a huge amount, not only from every tournament, but from every camp that you're involved with. The game itself has changed and evolved in that time. The details of how we play have progressed. I've now managed some of the biggest games in world football, so I can't compare where I am now to where I was then in terms of my knowledge and understanding, but in another 5-10 years that'll be the same again, unless you've got a closed book to learning and improving, then anybody in any walk of life should be learning all the time and improving all the time.
And you always say that the scrutiny that comes with the job, and you sort of accept that, and I know you shut a lot of it out, but what would you say is the biggest misconception about you?
I don't know. I'd have to have read everything that's been written about me to say that, really. I don't really worry too much about what's being said outside. I'm obviously aware, because I'm in press conferences, that the types of questions that are asked, but the longer I've been in the role, you realise there's so much you can't affect, and it's pointless being distracted by noise outside. International tournaments especially are very noisy. Trying to keep the group, the players, the staff on track is really key. So if I'm distracted by comments, articles, noise, then I'm not going to be able to lead everybody else through that. So I guess you get more comfortable with having an understanding of that, realising this is the landscape we're in, that's what we're going to be dealing with, but not letting it affect how you do your job, really.
I thought you might say that. So can I put two assumptions to you that I feel they often seem to come up anyway. One is this idea about how conservative, or whether you are too conservative, or whether the balance of the side, as I think Harry Redknapp put it the other day about letting the handbrake off this summer, which is a phrase Arsene Wenger used to use. Do you think is that fair? Is that criticism fair, do you think? That maybe in the past you've been too cautious, or you've thought about the fallibility of England teams of past has kind of influenced the way that you've constructed this team now?
Well, I think there have been different stages on the route as a team. As I said at the start, we felt to give the team stability. We had an inexperienced defence. If I go back to Russia, an inexperienced defence, less depth in midfield, no wide players in depth to be able to change consistently. So, but I think we went further than people thought we might in that tournament. I guess a lot of those observations would have been around Euros final, and probably some Nations League games where, really strange sets of circumstances. I don't think anybody would say that was the case in Qatar, and I don't think anybody could say that's been the case in the qualification away in Italy, at home against Italy, Ukraine. We haven't always clicked in every one of those games in an attacking sense, but we haven't held people back. Or there will always be, I think, for any coach, okay, what's the ideal balance here of the team in terms of numbers of attacking players? And because if you get killed in transitions, which I see big teams sometimes happens to them, then the coaches get killed for being naive. So you're always going to face that. I know Didier Deschamps has had extreme, unbelievable success with France and gets criticised for the makeup of his teams as well. So I think people would like fantasy football. Very few teams really play that. The biggest coach in the world, or biggest coaches in the world have balance to their teams. The most successful teams have balance. And there will always be debate about that until you put a team out on the pitch and people see whether that balance works or not.
It's part of the problem with that the Premier League is so good every week. It is arguably one of the best seasons ever, just in terms of pure entertainment, that when the international football comes around, people expect a kind of version of that or a continuation of that, when really it's a very different animal.
Well, clearly, I think the Premier League is exciting every week. Whether it's perfect every week is another question. Clearly, you're working 300 days of the year with the players or more at a club. With the international team, you get the players for 3 or 4 days, then you play. So the connections between the players, the relationships between the players, the synchronicity between the players, if you like, is very different, and you're trying to get players off of 5 or 6 or more different ways of playing with their clubs and onto one page. So to get that cohesion is more difficult in an attacking sense. There's no question about that. But that is the great challenge, and that's one of the things in the tournaments that we've liked, to have more time with the players to be able to help get them working together, get the consistency of their messages, the consistency of how we want to play.
The other one I wanted to ask you about was in-game substitutions, sort of in-game management. Are there games you look back at and think, I know hindsight's a wonderful thing, the games you lose, you always think, well, maybe I could have done something differently, but are there games where you think, I should have been more proactive here, or I didn't make the right change, or knowing what I knew then, I made the wrong call?
Well, I think the one thing with changes is the changes that you make obviously play out. The changes that you don't make never do play out. So when people say we should have made changes, in some of the games that we're talking about, I haven't heard them say what those changes should have been. So for example, I don't know, Croatia in the semi-final, would you change tactically to try and pose them a different problem? With hindsight, well, yes. However, part of that would have been altering the midfield, and then you're perhaps outnumbered in midfield against Modric, Brozovic and Rakitic. And so, yeah, if I'd heard really good solutions to what we should have done in those games, then I might think differently about that. The final with Italy, we were a goal ahead. Was at the moment and we hadn't conceded any chances of note, but the momentum of the game maybe was against us. Is that the moment to go from a back five to a back four? Well, of course, because the game plays out and ends up a draw, you'd say, well, maybe if we'd made that change, it could have been different. But we still had an hour playing 4-3-3 and didn't manage to make a breakthrough. So I think ultimately games will always be assessed and reviewed with the benefit of hindsight. And as a coach, you have to make decisions with the information you have at any given time. And of course, the decisions that weren't made never play out, so you never know if they'd have been right or not.
Of course. Obviously, we don't know the squads, so I can't really ask you about too many players, but Jude Bellingham, I'm assuming, will probably be in it if he's fit. How has his slightly more advanced role for Real Madrid changed your thinking? When you're talking about 4-2-3-1 and 4-3-3, do you build a team around him in that position? Do you make him fit into a system you already have? How has that kind of dynamic changed because of the evolution that he's had in Spain?
Well, he's always been really with Dortmund a more attacking minded 8. There's moments he's played as one of a double 6, and he's done that with us a couple of times early on with us. But he's allowed the licence to go forward, and with Madrid he's had a lot of freedom, huge amount of freedom really. He's been a false 9 most of the season, so he's been an attacking player, and he's had a devastating impact on games through doing that. So clearly he's a player you want to allow to make the difference in the penalty box, which he did in our last game with Belgium, for example, late in the game. Has it changed? We're probably seeing him as a more advanced player than we were 2 years ago, when you're still looking at everything that he might be. And of course, when you're playing in a certain way every week with your club, then to do something completely different when you come with the national team is more challenging. But he's without a doubt, one of the players that needs to be in the team, and it's getting the right to all those players. What's the best balance for the whole group? And
there is that expectation around Jude that because of what he's gone and done in Spain, and obviously I know he played in Qatar, but this could be his tournament. That there are very few players that people look at in world football who think he could go and really make this tournament his own. Firstly, do you think he can handle that kind of spotlight? And secondly, as a manager, how do you sort of take that away from him? Yeah, well, he is still 20 years old, and he's a player who we've got to make sure that we look after. He has had an incredible season with Madrid, certainly the first 2/3 of it. He's had a bit of an injury and missed some football since, but in terms of impact at arguably the biggest club in the world, he couldn't have wished to have had a better start. But equally, if we're going to win a tournament, lots of players have to deliver, the team have to deliver. It can't just be one player in Jude that has to deliver. And we're fortunate that we've got other players that will score goals, and we've got other good players in the team. What he has is an incredible mentality at such a young age to grab games by the scruff of the neck when they're going against you, and that insatiable desire to win. And even at the young age he is, that has a big impact on the rest of our team already. And just a final couple. I know you talked about your future in March. I'm assuming you're not about to tell me what you're going to do. So a question I have on this is, do you see yourself in management next season in some capacity? I guess another way of asking that is, do you think you'll need a break from this if you do walk away, or could you see yourself diving straight back in somewhere else? I don't have any vision of what
next year will look like, because everything for me depends on this summer. Everything geared towards how do we win this tournament. We're clearly one of the teams that can win it. There's big expectation, which is completely understandable given what we've done over the last 5-6 years, and so we're very comfortable with that expectation. It's brilliant that our supporters are excited about the team, but it's pointless me looking beyond that, really.
Pointless, but as an American broadcaster, can I ask you about 2026 and what that, I mean, just the appeal of that? It must tempt you, that kind of tournament, 48-team World Cup, 3 big countries.
Oh, I think 26 will be an amazing World Cup. I mean, I'm young enough, or old enough rather, to remember 94. I didn't go, and obviously England didn't qualify, but you know that any sporting event that USA are involved in hosting, and clearly Mexico 86 I also remember, and that will be an amazing tournament, which will be a different sort of challenge to, if you think about the travel and the time zones compared to the last World Cup, it couldn't be more different. Temperature changes and altitude and everything else that you could face. So yeah, that will also be an amazing tournament.
Tempt you to stay on?
Well, that'll depend on playing well, getting results, wanting to stay. Any number of things will be wrapped up in that. But yeah, that's for after this summer, really. And
final question. Normally you wouldn't share your internal targets, but I'm guessing it's fair to say the target this time is to win the tournament. Do you feel that the players are ready to embrace the responsibility of that, the aspiration of that? Rather than fear the size of the challenge. Yeah.
I mean, that was the target for the last Euros. We were so close. That was the target in Qatar, because once you've got as close as we did in the Euros, then that has to be. You can't talk to the players about anything less than that. They wouldn't be excited. They'd wonder what you were thinking. I think the belief is there. The results over a period of time are there. That doesn't mean we're the only team going there with that belief and with good players and a good team. But for us, that has to be our aim.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, James. Thank you.